Hello, guys and gals, and this is let me check my notes here, part 9 of our reading of A Natural History of Dragons, a memoir by Lady Trent, and this is a book by Marie Brennan. Now, as always, we're going to go over the copyright information. I'm using different software to record these. Not only does it lower the file size of these from like 2 gigabytes to like 50 megabytes, but it also just makes it a lot easier for me and a lot quicker for me to upload these. It was taking half an hour to upload these videos, and with this new method, it takes literally 2 minutes. So I can basically upload 3.5 hours of content in literally 5 minutes. So, anyways, I'm always one for labor-saving devices and stuff like that, but we're going to go over the copyright information here. It'll be on the screen, and it has been for a while now because I'm a total train wreck today. Anyways, Natural History of Dragons is copyright 2013 by Brennan Noonschwander. All rights reserved. Interior illustration by Todd Lockwood. Maps by Rice Davies. And designed by Greg Collins. It's a tour book, in other words. So, the tour I knew was Tim O'Rourke. But anyways, we are going to pick this up. Anyways, in the last episode, or part, they were attacked by a dragon. Basically, a dragon that was supposed to be, calm and non-threatening and stuff like that. And so they don't know what's wrong. They made it to this village. The driver had both his legs broken. And, so yeah. And she had an opportunity to go home, but she didn't take it. So let's figure out where we were at. I'm going to probably have to read back a little way, because I haven't done this for a week or so. So, oh, I better turn on some light. There. His hazel eyes searched mine. The mountain wind disarranged his hair, adding a touch of distress I would have found charming under other circumstances. Only then did it occur to me that I had left without so much as brushing my own, let alone pinning up my hair. What sort of image was I presenting now? Argument or no argument. Perhaps my own distress charmed him. Jacob sighed, though the worry did not leave his eyes. Can I at least ask you to keep close to home for now? Hilford is asking questions of the village leader. What's going on with the dragons, and where is Gretelkin? And where Gretelkin is? Until we have that settled, please behave yourself. I resented the implication that I was misbehaving already, but that faded next to other concerns. I had assumed that Gendrick Gretelkin, Lord Hilford's local contact, was one of the men rushing about last night. He's not here? No, he isn't. Will you go back to the house? The house where I will have to face the incomprehensible Dagmira. Yes, dear. Please let me know what's going on when you can, and what we are supposed to do for food. There should be a cook. That's another thing Hilford's asking about. I think. Jacob tried to smooth his hair back down, only to have it blown astray again by the wind. I will arrange for something. I climbed the stony path back toward our borrowed house, resolutely not looking back towards the Chiaverin wagons and my chance to depart. Chapter 8. An introduction to Drustanev, Mr. Gretelkin's absence, and we attempt to proceed. I have written before about Drustanev in A Journey to the Mountain of Vistrana. If you should happen to own a copy, though, or are intending to buy one, as I encouraged before, I beg you not to pay any attention to what I said there concerning the village, or indeed the Vistrani people as a whole. The words I wrote then heartily embarrass me now. I was attempting, against my inclination, to conform to the expectations of travel writing. as practiced by young ladies at the time. It is a worse piece of drivel than Mr. Condale's wanderings in central Antiope. Antiope, inspired more by the theatrical convention of colorful, semi-prophetic Vistrani characters than by the people I knew in Drustanev. To hear that to hear that book tell of it, Vistrani is a land of wailing fiddles, flash-eyed women, and sweet, strong wines, which is to say, a land of the most tedious cliches. I drank more tea in Vistrani than wine, heard fiddles rarely, and never once saw Dagmir's eyes emit anything resembling a flash. You would be better served to read a history book which will explain to you the many threads woven into the fabric of that nation. The position of their mountains nearly straddled the neck of Antiope has brought most of the peoples of this continent trampling past at one time or another. I'm going to try these names. Chiaverans, Iversh, Achaeans, and Bolskoi, and more. Those last ruling Vistrani are as a client state for 60 years before our arrival, but those influences have remained largely in the valleys and lowlands, trickling up only piecemeal to the shepherds and hunters in the mountains, where an intense Vistrani identity holds strong. Young ladies are also expected to wax rhapsodic about the charms of the places they visit. Men, when they write about their travels, are permitted to complain and to assert the natural superiority of their homelands. While I am relieved that my sex forestalled me from committing to print any sign of the latter sort, I must take this opportunity to say what I could not admit then. I hated Drustanev. Not the people, though. I rarely understood and often resented them. Oh, not the people. I rarely understood and often resented them. In the end, I'm grateful for all of their aid and their forbearance in permitting us to come among them. And there were points at which the mountains touched my heart with their beauty, but I often detested my physical circumstances and have never felt the slightest urge to return. Some of it was a simple matter of climate. The astute among you will have noticed that almost all of my expeditions have been to the warmer regions of the world. Achaea, the Broken Sea, and so forth. The one notable exception, apart from Vistrani, my flight into the Murti-Hamas was regrettably unavoidable. My native companions in those places often expressed amazement at my willingness to endure the heat. In this experience, we Skirlings are a cold adapted lot who wither and die without regular applications of chilly fog. But I have always preferred warmth to cold, however excessive it may be, and so the mountains of Vistrana in springtime were hardly to my taste. The wondrous prospect of dragons had convinced me to overlook this impending misery, but now that I am subjected to it, I became very grumpy indeed. For one thing, springtime, quote-unquote, to the Vistrani means something rather different than it does to us Skirlings, or to nearly anyone. Get this page to turn. There. Who may be reading this, be them arrogant, or so on, unless I have acquired devotees in Vistrana, which I suppose is possible. Spring, to the inhabitants of Drustanev, is the time when their lowland cousins drive the flocks of sheep up to the so-called middle pastures near to the village. This usually happens in early Florus, not long before our arrival, and you may deduce the average local temperature from the fact that the villagers do not shear their sheep until late in the season. So in other words, it's probably pretty cold. At that time of year, snow still lingers in the steep valleys, especially where spruce and fir grow too thick for the sun to easily penetrate. Fresh falls may occur through the end of Florus or beginning of Gramines. Our expedition saw flurries almost into messes. I have had gentlemen, I use the term loosely, mock me for complaining of having been cold the entire time in Vestrana. To them I say, join me next summer in the deserts of Achaia, and we will see who fares better then. I may be elderly, and I certainly detest the cold, but that does not make me delicate. Drusenev was a scattered place, houses planted in whatever spot offered enough level ground, with nothing one could particularly call a street running among them. Most appeared too absurdly small. Beneath the tall peaks of their thatched roofs, tall because of the need to shed the abundant snow, the people were and are shepherds in the warmer months and hunters in the winter. They trade fleeces, woven blankets, and hides in the lowlands. The slopes around their villages have been shaped over time by the centuries of human habitation. Some have been cut into small terraces suitable for local crops, but the primary alteration is that every 10 years or so the men go out and set fire to the forests. I was not privileged to see this event, though I would have enjoyed it, I think, for the heat, if nothing else. But I'm told the ashes enrich the soil, creating good pasture land for some time. And afterwards, the kind of young forest that attracts deer. Sheep eat the grass, wolves eat the deer, and dragons eat everything that doesn't run away fast enough. I detested the cold and the isolation, the repetitive food reeking of garlic, but the true root of my suffering was that I was in a foreign land, far from everything familiar, and I adapted very badly. You may think it would be romantic to run away there, like young Thomas in Mrs. Watry's insufferable 3-volume novel, and for some of you, it might be so. For me, it was not. Looking back on it now, my feelings have faded into a kind of gentle dislike that might also be called fond. And so I will not harp too much on the misery I felt when I sat down to yet another sour-flavored soup, or looked out the unglazed window to see snow falling yet again. But it may help to understand a few of my subsequent actions if you bear in mind that I'm going half mad in Drusenev. The dragons were the one thing that could distract me from it. The house we were staying in belonged to Jindrik Gretelkin, who was of the class they call Razish in Vestrani, a sort of local agent to the boyar. As Lord Hilford had said, that was the definition of the term. Its true meaning, particularly in this locale, took longer for us to discern. Much would have been clearer had Gretelkin been there, but he was not, and that absence was the primary concern on that first full day in Drusenev. By the time Lord Hilford arrived at the house with Jacob bearing a hamper of food for our lunch, I had given up on Vestrani and was repeating myself to Dagmira in Skrilling, over and over again, louder with every repetition, as if volume would succeed where vocabulary did not. Our trunks were sorted, but the furniture in which to store their contents was lacking. And, okay, here we go, 14. Dagmira did not seem to understand it. Moreover, Lord Hilford's beloved chair that he hauled with him wherever he went had been damaged when the wagon overturned, and in my frustration I was about ready to scrap the thing for kindling. Some of my irritation, though, came from hunger, and so I was relieved to find the Earl unpacking sausages and bread rolls onto the kitchen table. If you could acquire chairs, Mrs. Camhurst, he said, we can sit down and talk. 3 chairs and 1 stool were scrounged from other parts of the house, and we felt like the ravaging wolves upon our meal. Mr. Wilker nobly taking the stool. Gretelkin, Lord Hilford said after the first round of food had vanished, is not here. He sent a message warning me that now was not an opportune time for research, but knowing how the international post can be, he also took the precaution of traveling to Sanverio in hopes of intercepting us. It seems that both the message and Gretelkin went astray. Do you think he's all right? I asked, in light of what had happened to our driver. My imagination was creating a variety of unfortunate scenarios for the absent Gretelkin. Give me just a sec here. Okay. Likely so, the Earl said. The villagers don't see much cause to worry. At any rate, odds are we missed him on our way into the Highlands. It's easy enough to do. The optimism in his tone was only a little forced, but I wondered what he would have said had a lady not been present. What of the dragon? Mr. Wilker asked. It's clearly this isn't the first time such a thing has happened, but no one will tell us. No one will talk to me about it. Lord Hilford shook his head and reached for another roll. Not to me. Nor to me. But you are correct. There have been other attacks. I was able to winkle that much out of the village mayor, Urjash Mazhuston. Not so many that we must fear for our lives every time we step out the front door, but enough that he did not wish to speak of them to a foreigner. This produced a quiet moment at the table. I wondered, but did not ask, whether anyone else was questioning whether we could even do what we had come for. Jacob broke the silence. Do you have any idea what might cause such a thing? Is there a disease akin to rabies that affects dragons? Or do they, like wolves, prey on human settlements when times become harsh? Lord Hilford's eyes gleamed. That, Camhurst, is an excellent set of questions to answer. I haven't the faintest clue, but we shall address ourselves to the matter forthwith. I kept silent as our luncheon continued, attending to every word, but striving not to draw attention to myself. This, I remembered firmly, was to be my role here, facilitating their research from this home base in Drustanov. Since no one had yet tried to forbid us our work, the gentlemen were making plans to ask for maps and scour the surrounding area. Gretelkin should have had that information for them, I reminded myself, but in his absence, the gentlemen were prepared to fend for themselves. If you doubt the restraint of my intentions, please remember I was only 19 and not yet Lady Trent, with all the associations that name conjures up. I did not yet even know that dragons were to be my lifelong career. I thought this Vestrani expedition was all I would ever have, and I was determined to do my best in the role allotted to me as an efficient and effective helpmeet. Which is a lofty way of saying that I spent the following week butting heads incessantly with Dagmira. My command of Vestrani improved rapidly through sheer necessity and use, and while I do not claim my grammar was good, at least I acquired the words I needed. It did not help that Dagmira had a way of seizing my hands and kissing them both whenever I placed a new piece of vocabulary. In Vestrana, this is a courtesy shown to those of higher rank, but the sardonic manner in which she did it was more like a Chiavoran woman throwing her hands into the air to praise the Lord for a miracle. Some of the words I searched for, even Dagmira did not seem to know. It soon became apparent that what I considered to be a minimal amount of furniture just barely enough for us to scrape by, was extravagant by the standards of rural Drustanev, and some of the pieces I wanted, such as a wardrobe for hanging my dresses, existed nowhere in the village or even in Dagmir's understanding. To obtain them would require that we have them brought up from Sanverio, which was not worth the time and expense. We would, I suppose, with the long-suffering martyrdom of gentlewomen in rough circumstances, have to make do. We were equally short on servants, though that at least I had expected. A shockingly pale boy named Iljish served the gentlemen, or rather Jacob and Mr. Wilker, with Mr. Wilker himself playing servant to the Earl, and after the first day we had a placid cook whom nothing seemed to disturb. But Dagmira was the one I dealt with most, and began to suspect that no facility with her language would aid me in breaking through the barrier of her manner. She was not imperturbable, far from it, with her hand-kissing and frequent diatribes too rapid for me to understand, but whether calm or distraught, she seemed utterly unaffected by anything I said to her. It is fortunate that I had not expected or hoped for my maid to be a source of companionship while in Vestrana. I would have been gravely disappointed. I did not tell Jacob or the others how much of the work around our house I took on personally. The tedious work of cleaning and other such domestic tasks I left to Dagmira, of course, but anything related to dragons I kept jealously to myself in the absence of proper shelving. I acquired a number of crates which sufficed for the purpose, and arranged those volumes we had brought with us as much sufficed for the purpose, and arranged those volumes we had brought with us with as much care as if I were organizing a grand library. Mr. Wilker had brought a large map of Vestrana and a smaller one of the mountains around Drustanev, which I tacked up onto the wall, bringing a spot of relative brightness into the otherwise grim house. The sitting room became our working room, and we lacked any place more suitable. I confess I did not mind this, as it meant any conversation we had as a group were liable to be held in there, giving me more time in the one place I felt anything like at home. As the days passed without sign of the absent Gretelkin, Jacob and Mr. Wilker began the task of mapping the surrounding countryside. We had not brought surveyors' tools, so their work was imprecise, but Mr. Wilker's childhood collecting fossils on Niddy meant he was more accustomed to tramping about the countryside, albeit a flatter one, and mapping the area in his mind. A third sheet went up onto the wall and was taken down each evening for me to add their findings to it in the best draftswoman's hand. In my best draftswoman's hand. During the day, Lord Hilford paced in front of it, muttering often to himself. The reason for his muttering was that without Gretelkin's guidance, they had very little notion of where to go looking for dragons. It was often possible to see them winging through the air during my morning constitutional around the village, which I undertook so as to have some escape from the grim darkness of our house. I glimpsed the beasts gliding about the distant mountain peaks, long winged shapes instantly distinguishable from those of raptors, but to see them more closely was a much greater challenge. The Vestrani rockworm, you see, prefers it to lair in caves. This, along with its stony gray hide, gives rise to the name. Once such a layer is found, the natural historian may track the inhabitants' movements and see where it goes to feed, to water, to attract the attention of other dragons. He may, if he is bold, enter the lair during the dragon's absence to examine its castings and ordure. The lair is nearly indispensable, a nearly indispensable starting point for such work. But first, it must be found, and one of the reasons Vestrani rockworms love to lair in caves is because they abound in the region, which is largely a karst landform. The primary function of the map my husband was making with Mr. Wilker was to mark the locations of caves. They discovered easily half a dozen each day, though many were too small for dragons. Some they discovered on their way home, passing through an area they thought already mapped in its entirety. Jacob found one by the unfortunate expedient of falling down a loose, steep slope, fetching up on a ledge beneath an overhang of brambles that had previously obscured the cave's entrance. From their eyes, intrepid man that he was, he had Mr. Wilker lower down an unbroken lantern so that he could search the interior before finding a route back up. Deep gorges in the stone of the floor said a rockworm had indeed once laired there, but the drift of dead leaves above those gouges betrayed how long ago that had been. In the dark of night, when I lay on our lumpy, uncomfortable bed and tried to go to sleep, my mind entertained itself with even wilder visions of how I might solve this puzzle on their behalf. It began with half-reasonable notions. I could sit with a sketch pad at a good vantage point and draw the movements of the dragons to see if there was a pattern, and pray none of the dragons spotted me and swooped in for an easy meal. That's why the notion was only half reasonable. I could make my own search of the mountains, concentrating in areas Jacob and Mr. Wilker had not yet covered, and pray I didn't fall as my husband had, breaking my leg, and lie helpless until a dragon came looking for an easy meal. I could walk empty-handed into the Vestrani wilderness, trusting to my childhood dream of dragons to guide my step, as Panachi had been guided by the Lord in the desert, until fate led me to the perfect lair, where I would become an easy meal. The deranged side of my mind invented these ideas, but the practical side knew where they would end. Then again, I should not speak so readily, of practicality, although I did at last find a solution to our problem. The means by which I arrived at it was nearly as foolhardy as the worst of my dreams. We're going to have to stop this here. If you like this content, then make sure you like and subscribe and ring the bell so you know when I upload. Also, we've been reading from, as you can see on the screen, A Natural History of Dragons, a memoir by Lady Trent. It is a book by Marie Brennan. And oh boy, I closed my book without putting the bookmark in it. Oh well. Anyways, so if you want to, check the description if you want to support me in any way or to join the Discord server. And that's all for now. Thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great day.